Good morning, my fellow WaterSmartians. I first want to tell you guys that we've been doing this for 13 years now, and I actually feel this year just a little bit emotional that we're here, frankly. So I appreciate everybody for being here today. Looking out even upon your half faces is really rewarding to me. I think we got a lot of good energy this year, and we're going to have a good time. Just for my information, raise your hand if this is the first time you've been to this event. Wow, that's a good thing, because one of the things, it looks kind of like a 50-50-ish, and meaning the others have already heard me speak, so they didn't bother to show up. What this conference is about is conveying information, person to person, generation to generation, profession to profession. So it's really important that we get new voices in here all the time, and that you can learn something from those of us that have done this for decades, and others can learn what's going on with new people and new ideas. My name is Doug Bennett. I'm the Conservation Manager for the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and on behalf of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, all of our conference partners, and the community of Southern Nevada, I'd like to welcome you here today. This is what I look like when I'm not working. Actually, I might have even been working that day because it was COVID, right? So I may have been wearing a hat and a t-shirt, I'm not sure, and been out in the desert even. So this is what I'll look like if you try to grab me in the hallway. So that's my mask. We do want to talk a little bit about masks. I think you guys are doing exceptionally well. We had a series of workshops and events yesterday. I think people are doing what they need to do, but I want to make sure that we cover it. So in the state of Nevada, we are seeing COVID in retreat. So the numbers now are more than 40% lower than they were during the summer surge that we saw. But we can't afford to be complacent. I have a lot of confidence that the people in this room, because of what we all do for a living, trying to get people to make minor changes in their own personal life to better the community, I think we're probably a pretty responsible bunch of people. So you have to wear your mask in indoor public spaces. I'm not wearing one now because when a speaker addresses an audience at a distance, Nevada law allows us to be unmasked. There are no mandatory distancing requirements. We spaced your chairs just a little farther than normal, but you need to find your own comfort space. If people are crowding in on you, you need to figure out where you would like to be, right? So everybody has different tolerances. There is not a policy for how close people can be to each other in this venue. You can remove your mask to eat or drink. Please be actively eating or drinking. So there are a lot of folks that I see, they'll put a cup of water next to them on a table, and then they'll engage in a 1-hour-long telephone call in the hallway surrounded by other people. So, but use your discretion. If you're eating or drinking, obviously you're going to be doing that without a mask. And then if you're a speaker at this event, wear your mask, but once you approach the front of the room to speak at the event, you at your own discretion may remove your mask. You may also keep your mask on, whatever you decide. We've tried to create enough space between the speaker and the first row of the audience that it's a safe space for people to be able to be unmasked at the front of the room. Let me tell you a little bit about the event. So the mission of this event is to accelerate the development and adoption of water efficiency programs, policies, and products. Those are three essential tools that we use in urban water efficiency. People like me that work for an agency, we develop programs. We provide incentives. We run educational programs. We try to deliver information and knowledge and some of those products out to the community. The policies are vitally important. I don't know if you noticed, but there's no grass at this hotel. And in fact, half of this community has been built under a policy where we eliminated the ability to put non-functional turf grass in front of a dentist's office or at a gas station because it was using a huge amount of water. So policies are critically important. We as governments and as water agencies need to find a way that our cities can meet the needs of our residents and stay within our water resources. And lastly, products are vitally important. So a lot of conferences obviously have expositions or exhibitors. I want you to know that we really embrace those exhibitors. Without the innovations that they come up with, without the knowledge that their engineers and their product development people have, we wouldn't have as many tools as we have to deliver water efficiency programming to the communities we live in. And I'll also let you know that those folks cut the cost of registering for this conference by about half by being here, by being our sponsors, by being our exhibitors. So please embrace the idea that people are here to show you their innovations, and that those innovations may have a place in your organization or your programs, wherever you may come from. There are people in blue shirts and red shirts here. And while I'm supposedly the program chair of this event, those people do all the work. And I especially want to recognize Patrick Watson. Patrick does a ton of work all year long to bring our speakers together, get everything evaluated and rated. And then all of our staff that work at this event, stop somebody in a blue shirt if you have a question or comment about how things are running. We'd be happy to hear from you. We're a not-for-profit event. I don't have an organization I'm trying to run. We're not trying to make money at this event. In fact, in some years, we wind up with extra revenue. Other years, we take a hit. So what we try to do is just generally break even. My agency puts a lot of effort into this event, and we contribute a lot. One year, I realized that we were coming out tens of thousands. This is about a $350,000 undertaking. But one year, I realized we were coming out $20,000 to $30,000 ahead every year. Well, I'm not for profit, right? We already had a safety net so that we could take a loss in a particular year, as last year was. But we partnered with a group called the University's Council on Water Resources, and we created a scholarship program. So every year when you come to this conference, there are 20 students here, usually graduate students, studying in water resources, and we paid for their airfare, we provided them a hotel room, and we gave them some expense money. Not enough to have big fun in Las Vegas, but enough to feed yourself, right? Because these are students. They got to have some food. So welcome to our students, and you can see the work they're doing when we go to the poster sessions over in the exhibit hall. We're interdisciplinary. It used to be that people like me went to conferences with people like me, and we weren't hearing all the voices that needed to be heard. In your program, in your community, you might be talking to builders, you might be talking to government officials, you're talking to all these people, and they're all critical links in getting to where we need to go. And if we just stay in our silo, if people like me talk to other people like me, I'm not advancing the mission. So it's really important that we have people at this event that have different perspectives on water resource issues and water efficiency issues. We try to be dynamic. I want you to have fun while you're here. This conference is a little bit of a zoo because every 30 minutes you have 6 different places you can be. And we're not trying to give you a full-blown explanation of how everything works. We're trying to invite people in to give you a little insight to what they're doing and what they do, and for you to be able to follow up with them if that's something that captures your attention. Everyone here is here to share, and they should be happy to work with you after the event to get more detail about what they're doing. We try to keep it affordable. In 2008, 13 years ago, this conference was $390. But we really raked you over the coals. It was $395, right? So we try to subsidize the speakers to be here. We give them a lower rate. But we've kept a hold on the conference costs, and we try to make it so that you can come and participate. And if you couldn't participate or you missed a session, every single PowerPoint presentation given over the past 13 years at this event is on our website. So go in there and search, and you'll find that almost anything you can imagine has been presented by someone here. And you can find the name of the presenter and reach out to them at their place of business and get more information about what they're doing. So partners have always been a critical piece of this program. And when we first started, we had no standing, I guess, in this space, right? We're just an agency. We think people should get together and talk about these things. So we went out and we said, who are the important players in water efficiency? And we partnered with groups like the Alliance for Water Efficiency, the American Water Works Association, the US EPA Water Sense Program, the Irrigation Association, the ICC, the code bodies, IAPMO, also a code-making body, because we knew that not only did we need their input and their members to get this mission accomplished, but we also knew that those brands, those organizations, those professions would lend a lot of credibility and value to the conference. So many of our partners give out awards. We've got an awards ceremony tomorrow at noon, but I want to invite Deborah Hamlin with the Irrigation Association to come up, and she's going to give a brief presentation on some water efficiency awards the IA gives annually to some of the folks that are working in this space. Deborah?
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for allowing us to have time on your agenda again. Oh, I guess I can take this off. Thanks for that, too, Las Vegas. So thanks for having me here and allowing us to recognize some of the great work that is going on in this community. This is just the third year of our SWAT Awards program, and for those of you who don't know, SWAT stands for Smart Water Application Technologies, which is a free public-private partnership to promote or dedicated to efficient irrigation practices. So today we're going to honor two organizations, the first being recognized for its industry partnership, and that is programs working with landscape contractors. And the second is being a program that is focused on public engagement, so working directly with the homeowner. I'm pleased to announce that the town of Gilbert, Arizona, is the recipient of the Outstanding Industry Partnership Award for their landscape water budget program. The town of Gilbert, located just outside of Phoenix, wanted to find a scalable program that could conserve outdoor water among their biggest users, so HOAs, churches, parks, schools. Many landscape contractors never see the water use from the sites that they manage. So through their landscape water budget program, Gilbert provides monthly, customized, site-specific water use data, as well as a custom water budget as a reference point for efficiency. Then Gilbert works with the landscape contractors and their sites to install smart irrigation products like controllers, high-efficiency nozzles, flow meters, and rain sensors. And if these sites stay within their water budget, and a few other key program stipulations, they can carry the WaterWise Gilbert label. So by 2019, they had 290 participants in the program, and 135 were honored with the WaterWise Gilbert label. They saved over 188 million gallons of water and avoided almost $400,000 in excess water costs for these sites. They now have 458 sites in the program, increasing their savings every year. So Heather Turrentine, Gilbert's Water Resources and Conservation Coordinator, is unfortunately not arriving today until this afternoon, but we had the pleasure of meeting Heather and her team in the town of Gilbert, so you can see them on the stage, just 2 weeks ago. So please join me in congratulating the town of Gilbert. And the second award this morning is for the Outstanding Public Engagement. The recipient is the City of Garden City, Kansas, for their Customer Water Use Report. Garden City in rural southwest Kansas exclusively uses groundwater to meet its water needs. Similar to Gilbert, Garden City's goal was to first educate customers through water use information specific to their address, and second, to provide information on products to help them save water. In this case, it was sprinkler checkups and a WaterSense controller rebate program. In this program, every residential address in the city receives a report that compares their water usage to the average uses of their neighborhood and the average uses of all water users in the city. The data is presented to customers in terms of above or below average and how many dollars they are potentially saving or spending based on their current practice. So in 2017, when the first report was sent to customers, the gallons per capita per day usage for the city was 182 gallons, and in 2020, it was 162. So for those doing the math, that's an 11% improvement. The program also drives discussion and engages the customer with the city regarding their usage. So I've also wanted to add that when talking to Fred about this award, he said that this idea came from a session 5 or 6 years ago at this very conference. So that says great things about WaterSmart innovations as well. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Fred Jones, Water Resource Manager for the City of Garden City. Congratulations. I'm not used to doing these presentations post-COVID. I shouldn't have shaken his hand or been so close. So my apologies. We got to get used to this, right? It's this automatic putting your hand out. In any case, Doug, thank you so much. And thank you to the WaterSmart team to bring us together face-to-face and allowing the IA some time on the agenda. It is our goal as an association to continue to share the more and more stories of successful outdoor water savings programs along with the Southern Nevada Water Authority. So stop by the SWAT booth and the exhibit hall for more information and enjoy the rest of your program.
Thank you, Deborah. All right, a couple of more housekeeping issues. So I hope you guys found the QR codes in the hallway, and I hope you're able to figure out how to do this, but we use an e-program here. The e-program saves us 500 pounds of printed paper. It has great descriptions of the sessions. It allows you to put in your personal schedule and say, I want to attend this, 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 and this, and that way you don't have to browse everything. It just tells you where you need to be at any given time. And we now have a feature where you can rate those sessions. So you have feedback when you're in that session. Please ensure that you only rate sessions that you actually attended. Just a reminder. You do have the ability, if someone else wants to be messaged, you can make yourself available for messaging and maybe reach out. So if you're trying to find somebody at the event and you want to have a little chat with them, see if they're accepting messaging. And there's nothing to download. It's really a website. I want to say that, though, that if you don't use this program, there's so much going on here that you're going to be more bewildered than a chinchilla with a haircut. So today, what's going on? I hope you went and saw what Nimbus had to say about efficient cooling systems. We have some sponsor-hosted breakfasts in the morning. We had one this morning. There'll be additional ones tomorrow. We're going to hear from Jonathan Overpeck here in a few minutes. At 10:15, at the conclusion of this session, we'll be headed over to the exhibit hall, and we'll have the grand opening of the exhibit hall and see some of these new products. At 11, the poster sessions begin, and we have 2 areas for poster sessions. At the back of the hall, you're going to see the water resource students and the research that they're working on. At the front of the hall, you're going to see people that have viable, exciting water efficiency projects in their community that we simply didn't have space to put on the program, and so they're going to share it via poster session. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll be back into the traditional sessions, which tend to run about 30 minutes each. And then tonight, I forgot about tonight. There's Mary Ann. We're going to go mad. Those of you that know Mary Ann Dickinson from the Alliance for Water Efficiency, Mary Ann Dickinson, M-A-D. So we're going mad because mad is going. Mary Ann Dickinson, the former CEO of the Alliance for Water Efficiency, is wrapping up more than 50 years of service to the water efficiency community, I think both not on a national but even on a global scale. So at 5:15 this evening, there will be a reception, and I hope you'll be able to attend that. And then at 6:30 p.m., if you need a ride, you want to go check out the Las Vegas Strip, see what it's all about, do some gawking. We'll have a shuttle bus sponsored by Hunter. It'll meet right out in front of the porte cochere. When I moved here, I didn't know what a porte cochere was, but that's that big porch out in front of the hotel. So French, right? I speak French. And then tomorrow, we've got some sessions again at 7:45 in the morning and 8 o'clock in the morning. There'll be some technical sessions presented by Flume and by Orbit, and there'll be continental breakfast in those rooms. At 9 o'clock, we'll jump back into the sessions, 6 sessions running continuously throughout the day. At noon, we'll recognize some worthy folks, both in the product manufacturing sector and programming sector. The Alliance for Water Efficiency and the US EPA's WaterSense program will be giving out their awards at a luncheon. And I like beer. At 4:45, we will have a hosted reception back in the exhibition hall at 4:45 p.m. And again, there will be a schedule of shuttle buses that can take you to the Strip if you'd like a ride to go visit. That brings me to the most important presentation this morning. Jonathan Overpeck was a keynote speaker here in 2008. And I already explained to you, 2008 was our inaugural year. And just the year before, Dr. Overpeck, or Peck as he likes to be called, had been a recipient, along with his colleagues, for the work that he had done on the International Panel on Climate Change, 4th assessment. And they had received the Nobel Prize for that. And we thought it would be great to bring him in. He was very knowledgeable about the impacts of climate change on the Southwest. And he gave us a really sobering presentation foretelling us of the things to come. And don't get me wrong, even in 2008, climate scientists could see in the data that these things were happening. But now, 13 years later, we're seeing these things happen. We're seeing them in the news. We're seeing them in the places we live. They're having a significant impact on every aspect of our daily lives. I'm going to have to read some of these items. Dr. Overpeck is an interdisciplinary climate scientist. He's dean at the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. I did actually review some of his 220 papers that he's written. I didn't read them, but I looked for interesting titles, and I did read one about communicating with people about climate change. And I found it really interesting because I thought it really reflected the humility that he shows in his work. It's vitally important, but he understands that we're not going to make progress on this issue unless you can communicate that to people who may or may not agree with you. And how do you get those points across? I found that an interesting paper, and I did read that one. His work looks at how climate and paleoclimate dynamics affect the world we live in, including climate-vegetation interactions, conservation biology, climate change policy and law, environmental communication, and environmental education. He's led climate research projects on 5 different continents, was lead author for Nobel Prize winning team that produced the IPCC 4th assessment, and has produced more than 220 papers on climate change topics. Please welcome Jonathan Overpeck.
Great. Well, thanks, Doug. Appreciate the generous introduction. And it's great to see you all here in person. It's like, this is my first flight I've done in 18 months to come to was the flight I took to come here. And we've been very careful at the University of Michigan, and things are going pretty well with vaccination and masking. And never an infection being transmitted in the classroom or in the laboratory. So it really highlights the value of science to understanding a really critical problem. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. I was spent most of my life out here in the Southwest, mostly in Tucson, but also in Colorado. I grew up, part of my youth was in Michigan, so it's fun to go back there. I really appreciate rain after living out here for so long. And boy, we get a lot of rain in Michigan. And we got 80% of the nation's water in those big, huge lakes that we call Great Lakes. So I've turned from worrying all the time about when's the water going to run out in the Southwest to how are we going to manage the water in a very wet place where nonetheless people have treated water poorly, and it's a lot of pollution, for example. 13 years ago when I talked at this conference, I didn't realize it was the first one. I probably did then, but memory gets shorter as you get older. It was all about saying, hey, climate change is real, climate change is happening, and it's going to get a lot worse if we let it get worse. Of course, the main cause of climate change, the biggest source of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere, not just carbon dioxide, but also methane and other ones, is the burning of fossil fuel, the use of fossil fuel. It is 13 years later, when I reviewed the talk from back then, I realized that I'd sort of said all these things are going to happen, and now I can say even in 13 years, they all are happening in a very obvious way and are being attributed in statistical ways to the human element and these greenhouse gas emissions. Unfortunately, when you get a climate scientist to talk, it's not a uplifting talk usually. It really creates a sense of despair. And a lot of people these days ask me how do I deal with that despair? Because I've been spending more and more time talking to audiences like this, working with communities, dealing with the impacts of climate change. I have children. It can get to you. My wife's also a climate scientist. And really where I come up with the hope that I have and the optimism I have is that I can give these talks. I can share what I know as a scientist about what's happening and what will happen and how to solve it. I also get hope from the fact that I can help communities. I can also get hope from the fact that the solutions to climate change, and I usually do this at the very end, but I'm doing it right now at the beginning. We know what the problem is. It's like going into the doctor and you have a really nasty problem that you don't want the doctor to just give you a couple pills to treat the symptoms. You want the doctor to say, hey, I know what that is, and I know what the treatment is, and you can afford it. And lo and behold, you're cured. And that's where we stand with climate change. We have solutions now. The technology exists. It probably is cheaper to start using renewable energy, electrified mobility, a lot of the other solutions on the farm and in the factory. It's probably cheaper to go with those than to continue with fossil fuels before you even factor in the fact that you're getting all the climate change costs. Before you factor in the fact that fossil fuels are also the source of air pollution, whether it's in Detroit where I live, having to breathe that air from automobiles and factories, or whether it's out here in the West where it's wildfires that are being caused by the climate change that are being caused by the fossil fuel burning. This pollution is killing a lot of Americans every single year. So we get that as a free bonus if we switch to these solutions. So that's what gives me hope. And I want to today give you an update on where we stand. The focus in the West, I'm still very involved in West and Southwestern issues and science. It's all about demand management now. That's what you hear on. If you're talking about the Colorado River, everyone here probably knows the Colorado River had its first shortage declared in August. Arizona was a big loser in that shortage and will be a bigger loser as the shortages get bigger and bigger, which they will. Everyone is like, let's use less water. And that's really smart. It's really smart to do that in Kansas too and on the plains where I have a lot of friends because we're pumping aquifers that are non-sustainable. We're pumping them dry. And some of them, like probably out there in Kansas, there's a lot of water there, but it's fossil water. Eventually it will disappear. And so we have to use it very wisely. And what we're talking about here is a global problem. Another reason I have hope is that if we in America solve climate change, we develop the technologies, we market those technologies, we make sure that what we're doing is just and that everyone benefits, well, the whole darn world is going to buy those technologies. This is the 21st century economy, is solving the water crisis, which is the same part and parcel with the climate crisis. Okay? So I have a picture here, I can't see it, of India, a city not far from where the Taj Mahal is, that was Fatehpur Sikri, where a former leader in ancient times in India built a whole city. And then, oops, not enough water. So they abandoned this city. And it's a marvelous thing to go visit if you ever can do it. If you do it in the summer, you can feel like you have a good chance of getting a record-breaking heat wave and really suffering. But the point here is the problems we're talking about in the Southwest. We're the bullseye, we're the canary in the mine shaft. These are the same problems that are going to grip all the United States and are gripping the world. So let's talk about those. Because what I want to argue with you is that we do have to worry about the demand side. We do have to conserve water. It is an amazingly precious resource. The climate crisis is a water crisis. But if we don't stop climate change, the problem will get a lot worse because we'll be managing the demand for a dwindling resource. And in the Southwest, the surface water supplies, the only sustainable supplies in the Southwest, are going to get much smaller. Okay? So we'll all be depending on groundwater that's going to run out. I want to make some other scientific points. So here you got a slide that shows some of the things that are happening around the world, getting worse literally every summer. The big thing is wildfire in the United States. Well, you all know probably from reading the news that wildfire was also a huge problem in Australia a couple summers ago down under. They had what they call the Black Summer in 2019-20, where just unprecedented amounts of Australia burned. The Amazon is burning. It's a net source of carbon dioxide. We always in science, when I was in grad school, the Amazon sucks in all this CO2, just like the boreal forests around the sort of polar region suck in all this CO2. Well, now, unfortunately, we're releasing the CO2, and a lot of it is in the form of these huge wildfires. And of course, now in the West, where I called home for a long time, I still have a house and cabin up in the mountains in Colorado. Twice I've had ash falling on my porch, my deck, from fires nearby. We're burning up not just homes, we're burning up whole cities, whole towns now. Okay? This is something, just a few years ago, I'd sit around with fire guys who do climate, and we'd lament, what's going to happen? What's finally going to get people to pay attention? And we talk about how these guys, these experts on fire, were saying cities are going to burn. And that's what's happening now. Okay, but there's a scientific point here that I want to make. What do all these wildfires have in common with the heat waves that we're getting, right? That are killing people in our country, but they're also killing a lot more people in other countries. What does it have in common with the mega drought that's going on, 22 years here in the Southwest? What does it have in common with these amazingly large, destructive, and wet hurricanes? The hurricanes now that are just routinely causing more damage due to floods than to winds, even though the wind's energy is getting higher too. What do they all have in common? Does anyone want to shout it out? Climate change for sure, but what element of climate change? Temperature. That's the key point here. Everyone who talks about water likes to think about precipitation deficit, and that's a good thing. You got to think about that. But what people don't think about is how temperature, just a little bit of warming, is having profound effects on this world and on this country. Okay? Everything is getting affected by the warming. Okay? And I want to explain that to you because I think that's a key thing. The reason we have all this wildfire is this, for the same reason that when you're growing a garden in your backyard and you have an exceptionally hot couple of days in the summer, you have to water more or your plants wilt. We're basically drying out the soil much more effectively with just a little bit of warming, and the plants don't have the moisture they need anymore, so they're basically now kindling. Okay? And how much warming have we had so far? 1.1 degrees C. That's like about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? The last 5 years have been the warmest 5 years in the record of thermometers, global thermometer network on this planet. And you can see on this map that the warming is not uniformly distributed around the world. You get more warming at high latitudes. The Arctic is warming faster than I'm used to, do a lot of research in the Arctic, on Greenland and northern Canada. It's warming much faster than we thought it would, and a lot of things are happening worse and faster than we thought it would. But you're also getting more warming over land than over the ocean for a variety of reasons. Okay? This map just shows the pattern of warming since the beginning of the global thermometer record back in the 1800s. And the areas that are gray are areas we just didn't have thermometers back at the beginning. Such as in Antarctica, and we also know Antarctica is warming up dramatically, even though, paradoxically, we still get the cold polar vortex in the northern hemisphere, and South Pole just had its coldest since 1957 winter ever. Okay. So just a degree C is causing all this mayhem that we're already seeing. And I'm here to tell you that if we don't stop the burning of fossil fuels, if we don't stop climate change, we're going to talk several degrees. It gets more interesting than that and more scary. Okay? We're all water fanatics. You got to just admit it, right? We spend all our time thinking about water. Water is the lifeblood of the Southwest. It's the lifeblood of the world. We're lucky. This is what makes this planet a habitable planet. We're in that Goldilocks space where water can be liquid. Thank goodness. Well, what's happening with the warming atmosphere is that it's able to hold more moisture. Okay? For every degree C warming, the atmosphere can hold 7% more moisture. That's why the soil and the vegetation is getting dried out, because the atmosphere wants more moisture. It can hold more moisture. It's going to suck it out of somewhere. It'll suck it out of these huge reservoirs just east of us here. It'll suck it out of the soil. It'll suck it out of the vegetation. And you all know, right, that because you're water people, that the vegetation gives off a lot of water when it's taking in CO2. It's respiring. And it's a great way to wilt a plant. So we call this the intensification of the hydrologic cycle. And one of the things people get get confused on is this can mean dry places like the Southwest are going to get drier and are getting drier, and wet places like Michigan are going to get wetter. But the little dry spell that happens in the middle of the summer, every summer just about it seems, in Michigan, a very agriculturally productive state, that little dry spell is warmer now. So that's why we have to pay homage to our friends in irrigation. Because without irrigation, even in Michigan, we would have problems now. And on the high plains in Kansas, you better have irrigation. And out here, of course, we get a lot of our winter crops down in just south of here and over in Arizona and in California. And it's all irrigated ag, okay? But part of the reason for this is that this atmosphere is demanding more moisture, and when it rains, and it can rain, it rains a lot more. So let's just talk about the wet side of this. So there's some good news, but not really if you follow the news this summer. Because it has more moisture, that means when there is the right conditions, the low pressure, the front, everything you learned back in about meteorology, whatever you did, whenever the conditions are ripe for rain, it can rain harder. Okay? More extreme precipitation. If you don't think it's happening, it is. This is a map from the U.S. National Climate Assessment looking at data. It's the percentage change in the amount of rainfall that falls in the heaviest 1% of the rainfall events. Out in my neck of the woods now in the Midwest, even worse in New England, 40–50% increase in the amount of rainfall in these very extreme events. Remember Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy? This is one of the reasons it was such a wet event. Remember Hurricane Harvey? You know, and these other ones, the remnant storms that are now going through Tennessee this summer, up into New Jersey, all the flooding. This is why, okay? Turns out it's not as big a factor here, but it will be. It's, you know, it's already measurable, the effect, and it will just get worse and worse as the warming gets more and more. And obviously, I've already said it, when you have a lot of rain, you get a lot of flooding. Houston was submerged by that storm. The Midwest, whether you're on a farm or you're in Detroit, the headline in the Detroit News or the Free Press, either one, this summer was like, more floods. It's happening again. It happened like 4 times, where houses were literally, you know, water in the basement, whole roads like closed for power out, horrible flooding, just because the rain is coming harder. Okay? We have had dams break in Michigan. And you know, I'm not going to get into it, but we have to worry about these big dams on the Colorado. This is serious stuff. It can rain a hell of a lot harder, even here in the Southwest in the Colorado River Basin, than it has in recorded history. Okay? So here's the paradox. You can have much more rain faster because of climate change, and we're observing this and we're attributing it statistically to climate change. And you can have a lot less rain. More drought days, more severe droughts, longer droughts. For the same darn reason, the atmosphere is getting warmer. So in those places where it's just hot and hotter than before, we get what we call hot drought. We get mega drought. We get things that we've never seen before, all because the atmosphere can hold more moisture. Okay? This is why we're in our 22nd year of our mega drought in the Southwest. When I first came to Vegas, it wasn't in 2008, it was in 99. And I think Southern Nevada Water Authority was holding a conference. And Doug, I've always wanted to know who the guy was who got up sort of jauntily. And after I talked about climate change and the fact that, you know, we got to worry about drought in the Colorado River Basin. And he says, the reservoirs are full. In 1999, they were full. The Lake Powell and Lake Mead were full. And he just was like, hey, we got tons of water, man. And I bet him like a 6-pack or something meaningful back then. And I always forgot who he was. I said, we're going to have a drought in this river. Well, I left and the drought began. And usually when I talk, it rains. But nonetheless, in this case, 22 years of drought. This is the worst drought we've seen in recorded history. In the treating record, we've seen worse droughts, but this is the hottest drought. Okay, you can just see a couple of years here. Droughts moved around. Sometimes it looks like the Dust Bowl drought there out in affecting Kansas and other parts of the high plains. Other times it's down in the New Mexico area looking like the 50s, 60s drought. Sometimes it's just looking like, the droughts we've seen way too much. Arizona's always in drought. And California's getting hit hard too, and sometimes it goes all the way up in Canada down into Mexico. Okay? But the biggest news for everyone probably who lives anywhere around here this year is what's happening to the river. We finally have a declared shortage. Lake Mead's only 35% full. It's been, and through very clever water management, demand management, but also the Bureau of Reclamation have some really good scientists and engineers. They've managed to keep this river out of shortage when indeed it was in shortage a long time ago. But now we have a declared shortage. And what does that mean? Well, that means that the level in Lake Mead went below 1075 feet above sea level. All the users, 7 basin states in Mexico of that water have agreed when that happens, certain stuff happens. We short particularly Arizona, a little Nevada too. And if it goes down another level and another level, another level, each level already predetermined, there will be more and more cutbacks in water use. California, because they were very smart, gets away with the least amount of water shortage. The upper basin states like Utah and Colorado and New Mexico, they're going to pay dearly with this problem because they have to deliver 7.5 million acre feet to the lower basin over a certain period of time every year. This is really crisis time. And here's the projection, the latest multi-model projection. I remember I mentioned that the Bureau of Reclamation has some really good scientists. Well, they're able to model how future, going out a couple of years, how it'll affect the river. And no one can even tell you how much snow we're going to have this winter. But they can make a whole bunch of model runs, average these model runs together, and get the most likely scenario. And you can just see, as you move to the right in this diagram, that's time out 2 years, the models are all saying less and less water in Lake Mead, crashing through those other shortage levels. This is why everyone's talking about use less water, because otherwise we're going to get cut off. You know, Glendale depends on this water. It's a good thing they're doing demand management because they're going to get a lot less water if they're not careful. Okay, so let's go back to the science a little, not just the reality. Where's all the water going? I've said that the atmosphere demands more moisture and it gets it. There are a variety of ways it does this. Okay? The most obvious one to everyone in the room is evaporation. Off the, these big reservoirs lose a lot. They lose like collectively over 1 million acre feet just in evaporation every year. The biggest source turns out to be evapotranspiration, the plants in the soil transporting water into the atmosphere. The growing season in the Southwest and the headwaters of the Colorado have gotten 6 weeks longer. So the evapotranspiration starts earlier in the spring and goes later in the fall, and it's hotter the whole darn time, so there's more evapotranspiration. There's a big positive feedback with the snow. The snow is getting warmer earlier, later in the fall, earlier in the spring. All during the winter, you're getting more events where there's sublimation going straight from frozen to the atmosphere, water vapor. Other times, you're actually melting the snow and turning into water and evaporating it. But the point is that then the ground becomes less white, and it can absorb more solar radiation and warm that much more. And there are a bunch of these positive feedbacks in there. And all these things combined take water out of the river. Okay, how much has the river already declined? The flows have gone down 20% since the start of this drought. 20%. And about half of that we think is due to the warming. The other half is due to precipitation declines and other processes. Okay. There's also a lot more dust, for example, now that the soils are much drier. Go up on the Navajo Nation in the middle of the winter when there's a big windstorm, and you'll see what I mean. But it's blowing off of the deserts, the high deserts, onto the snow. The snow is no longer white, it's red, and it absorbs more radiation, and again, it's another positive feedback. So all these factors are playing out, most of them anticipated by climate scientists 10, 20, 30 years ago. Another climate scientist won the Nobel Prize for Physics just a couple days ago, Suki Manabe, and he's the one who said the high plains of the United States are going to dry out with climate change. He pegged that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was still a grad student. He's right. People say these models are no good. Suki's laughing about that. Of course, they aren't perfect, but they get a lot of things right. Here's the latest study on the Colorado. There have been a whole bunch, including work by myself and colleagues. But the latest one in Science magazine, sort of premier scientific journal, says for every degree C warming in the basin, upper basin, we'll lose 9% of the flow. And there's an uncertainty in that, so it could be as much as 12. So it looks like half of the reductions in flow are due to temperature increase. What does that mean for the future? Brad Udall and I published a paper in Water Resources Research a few years ago where we took all of the available information and made a projection of 35, 50% flow reductions by mid-century. And they just keep getting bigger and bigger as we go into the future. Okay? And that's just from temperature. Turns out precipitation is also going down in this region because storms in the winter are going further north. They're going on to Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. We're getting all the water now instead of the upper basin of the Colorado. So you add that in, it's bad. Now, some of the climate models, some of my colleagues would point out, say it's going to get wetter in the upper basin. That'll save the day. Okay? And I would say bull. Might say a longer word than that. I don't think it's going to save the day. Why don't I think it's going to save the day? What's happening in precipitation now? We think our climate models, our Earth system models, are really good, and they are. They can replicate a lot of what's happened, not just in the recent past, but in the paleoclimatic past, going back thousands of years. But really, it's Mother Nature. Mother Nature is very complicated. And, or Mother Earth, as many of my colleagues from Latin America like to say. The point is that the real world doesn't always behave the way we scientists think. So there are climate models that suggest it could get wetter. There are an equal number of climate models say it should get drier, but Mother Nature says it is getting drier. And precipitation is going down, and those storms are going further north. So what are you going to believe? Here we are in Las Vegas, the perfect place to talk about odds, okay? Put your money on the table. Do you believe the models that are saying it's going to get wetter, or the models that say it's going to get drier? My money is on the ones that say it's going to get drier, but I certainly am not going to bet about the ones that are going to get wetter. But let's just say it gets wetter. It still won't matter. What the heck's Peck saying? The problem is that we live in megadrought country. The Southwest is in megadrought country. This is a really cool reconstruction of Colorado River flow at Lee's Ferry, right between the upper basin and lower basin, based on tree rings that Dave Miko and Connie Woodhouse and a bunch of colleagues at the University of Arizona mostly, but other places as well, put together a number of years ago. They've done this several times. They come up with the same conclusion each time. I've actually had grad students work on this kind of problem with Connie Woodhouse. And you can see on this is essentially 1,200 years of Colorado River flow. You can see, ironically, that the 1920s, when they divided up the Colorado River water, were the wettest in the last 1,200 years. So that was bad luck. And then you had these periods marked in brown are these megadroughts. We're in a megadrought now. And you can see at the very top a green line on the white line. That just shows you that the reconstruction does a good job of reconstructing the instrumental record. But these big droughts are what really worry me. That's what I spent a lot of my career looking at, is what's up with these megadroughts? Are they real? What caused them? And there's a lot of, this is where the science is at the cutting edge. But the point is that these megadroughts happen. And the megadrought we're in now is anomalous because it's really got a big temperature signal in there. These megadroughts are probably mostly due to precipitation deficit for decades. And megadrought is a drought that lasts more than 2 decades. So what happens to us here in the Southwest if we get a megadrought? Even if mean precipitation, even if those wet models were right, and we get more precipitation, during a megadrought, forget about that. There's going to be less than normal precipitation, but they'll still be hotter than heck temperatures. So we'll get the full effect of the temperature for decades. Maybe that's what we're getting now. And look at this. We'll come back. I've already let the cat out of the bag, but everyone is turning to groundwater. Okay? This is why the Central Arizona Project Canal was built from the river over to Phoenix and down to Tucson was because those cities were starting to like collapse under the groundwater pumping. And so they wanted to have a sustainable water. And in order to build that canal, they had to give their senior water rights up to California. Remember the smart ones in this story. But anyhow, now that we're getting cuts again in Arizona, it's just a free-for-all, is the headline in a piece that Ian James wrote. Follow Ian James, and now at the LA Times, if you really want to get a good journalist working in this issue. But anyhow, people are pumping groundwater like never before again. And it's unregulated, basically, in Arizona. So there are communities that get Colorado River water, but the water just flows by because they're not allowed to use it anymore, farmers, and it goes to the cities. There are communities like Brad Udall's family grew up in, the Udalls you probably heard about, political family. They grew up on the northeast Arizona, up where they don't get Colorado River water, in towns like Show Low and Snowflake and other towns up there, big farming communities. They're going to run out of water, just like eventually Kansas will run out of water. You got to use this water very carefully because it's not renewable. It's water that accumulated over multiple glacial cycles and largely will never be recharged on human timescales. That's the story, folks. When I appeared here 13 years ago, we'd warmed the planet up about 0.5 degree. Now we've warmed it up 1 degree. And what a difference that makes. Okay? The last thing I want to highlight with you is, why is it? There's a big meeting, and you probably, those of you who follow climate change or just read the newspapers, are starting to sense this in the news. There's a big meeting happening in November in Glasgow, Scotland. And the world leaders are already starting to get ready for this. It's the Paris Agreement, which now all the countries of the world are part of. That's another reason to have hope. For a while it was the US, Syria, and Nicaragua weren't part of it. Now they're all part of it. And the idea here in the Paris Agreement is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial. Pragmatically, we've already warmed it up over 1 degree. So a lot of folks are saying, well, 1.5 is a pipe dream. It isn't. It's technically possible. But let's at least keep it below 2 degrees C. Why is it that the scientists told the policymakers, this is what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is, it's policymakers, and the scientists are providing information to those policymakers around the world, and we said, we really pray, we didn't say it that way, we strongly urge you to cap it at 1.5 or at the worst 2 degrees above pre-industrial, okay? And here's why. The impacts of climate change would be double what they are now. That alone would be very expensive, very deadly, very unacceptable. But it gets worse than that. There are these things we call tipping points. And if we go over a tipping point, it means that you're moving along, gradually warming this planet up, and all of a sudden, you're in a mode where you cannot stop it anymore. And that the global warming is going to go to a much warmer temperature in an irreversible, unstoppable manner. What do I mean by that? Here's a paper that was published in Nature 2 years ago, and on this map are a bunch of little circles. The color map is just showing, when this paper was written, where all the warming is occurring. It's at higher latitudes. That's a clue. And then they have these little circles with letters on it. And the question is, what are we worried about? Okay? It's all driven by Arctic warming, our amplification. Up there you have a lot of snow and ice, obviously, on water, on land, and the melting of that snow and ice is turning the Arctic into a much less reflective environment. It's absorbing a lot more heat. It can warm a lot faster. It's in a vicious cycle of warming, amplifying the warming. What we're worried about is that that will lead to permafrost melting. Well, actually, let's start. The Arctic amplification, it's melting the sea ice on the Arctic. Okay? Even in summer, you could, back in the day when we had famous explorers, try and go to the North Pole with sled dogs across the sea ice in summer. Can't do that anymore. You can go by ship to the North Pole, but most of the Arctic is now ice-free in summer. That means you've replaced the white surface of the ice and snow with the dark ocean. It can absorb a hell of a lot more heat. That is now leading to melting of permafrost like we've never seen before. What is permafrost? It's all over the place in the Arctic, and it's basically frozen soil that has been accumulating for thousands of years. And what is in that soil? Organic material. And what happens if you melt it? You start to release the organic material in the form of CO2 and methane, depending on how wet it is, 2 greenhouse gases. So we're starting to see an acceleration of the release of this methane, huge stocks of methane and CO2 as we melt the Arctic. And that is going to speed up global warming. And there's a lot of debate about, in the climate world, scientists, how much will it speed it up? We're not sure. You know, this is really, to me, I cannot figure out the best metaphor, but it's like a kid playing with a gun, doesn't know how a gun works, doesn't know what a trigger is, doesn't know what a magazine is, doesn't know anything. And the kid is just sitting there with his friends playing with the gun, loaded gun. That's what we're doing with the Arctic. We're not sure where the tipping point is, but at some point, vast amounts of carbon dioxide and methane could be released to the atmosphere, accelerating the warming in an unstoppable way. What else is going on? Another letter is D on this map. We're getting a lot of burning of forests up there. These boreal forests I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, they're burning. And some places in Siberia, they're burning all the way up to the coast of the Arctic Ocean. And some places in Siberia, they're not going out in winter because the permafrost is catching on fire. It's like you're in it's like you're in Ireland or something, and peat. It's just, so what's going on? All that carbon that is in the forests and the forest soils up there is going into the atmosphere in an increasing manner. Same thing in the Amazon. And there are all these possible tipping points in the system that not only will end up giving us a lot more sea level rise, enough to easily bury New Orleans and Miami and just about every city on the coast in America, but it will give us irreversible warming that could go 3 degrees, 4 degrees C, maybe more. We won't be able to stop it. Right now, we can stop it. And so we've told the policymakers of the world, every single country, 197 or 6 of them, you gotta stop the warming at 1.5 to 2 degrees C. Okay? It's not just like aspirational because we love the trees and the birds and the bees. It's because we could really screw up this planet. So this is my conclusion slide. You know, WaterSmart, to be WaterSmart now, you have to be climate smart. And it isn't just about demand management. You got to get out there in your communities and tell your leaders, your politicians, stop listening to those oil guys. They are destroying the frickin' planet, and they are destroying our water security, not just in our community, not just in our nation, but in the whole world. 7% per degree C, more moisture in the atmosphere, times 4 or 5 degrees C, we haven't seen anything yet. That's what the climate scientist community is trying to say, not just to the policy leaders, but this is why I'm happy to get on a plane and come down and talk to you. No one's paying me any extra money. I just want you to know that this is a huge problem, and your kids and grandkids are the ones who are going to get screwed the most. The poorer countries of the world are the ones who are going to get it the worst. But we're going to pay dearly too, particularly when you realize that we have solutions that are cost effective now. And all we need is, a big reconciliation bill. We got to get the job done, and I'm sorry to get political, but we got to get the job done in this decade, or else we're going to be playing with these tipping points. Okay? So the really good news here is we know what's going on. We know what the solution is. We know it's affordable, okay? But water, the climate crisis is a water crisis, and it's going to really hit our sustainable sources of water, and our unsustainable sources of water will only last so long, the groundwater. There is hope because we have all these solutions. And again, my biggest worry, shared by all the climate scientists of the world, is that we'll go across these tipping points. And I wish I could tell you with confidence how these tipping points all work, but we could already be going across them now. I don't think so. My colleagues don't think so. But we can save the day if we act in this decade. So with that, I'll say thank you. And I don't know, Doug, if we, it's hard to do question and answer, but if you want to, I can.
Yeah, actually, we don't have a microphone to accommodate that, so we're not going to be able to do that. But I will tell you that Dr. Overpeck mentioned that we're in a 22-year drought. Coincidentally, that is exactly when I moved into the Colorado River Basin. So I had nothing to do with it. I'm just trying to help. As he also pointed out, he did not get paid anything special to be here. He is one of those people that I think is a warrior on this topic. And all I have for you, Dr. Overpeck, is this T-shirt that says, "I lost my grass in Vegas." So.
Thanks, Doug.
It's classic. As always, thank you so much for that message. It's absolutely one we need to hear. I think you're hearing it, but we not only just need to hear it, we need to act upon it. And those actions can happen at every level. They can happen in your local community, they can happen at the state level, they can happen at the national level, and they obviously need to happen at the international level. So please do stay engaged. It's going to make a dire difference, not just in our lives, but in the lives of those who come after us. Beth, I think I had another slide, but I see the Windows logo up here. There we go. Okay, we're about to wrap up this session and greatly appreciate everybody's attention. And where we're going to go next is the grand opening of our exhibit hall. For those who have never been here before, one of our biggest complaints about this conference is that the exhibit hall is kind of far from here. So I want to warn you, you could use the exercise. We've been in here for an hour and 15 minutes, right? So get up and circulate. You're going to go down to the end of this hallway, you're going to go down the escalators, and you're going to head due west. You'll see some people mover escalators. If you get tired, you can hop on that. And then we're going to go up another set of escalators, and we'll be in the exhibit hall. To bring us a warm welcome to the exhibit hall and to acknowledge their sponsorship in this session this morning, I'd like to invite James Dyer to come onto the stage. We talked a lot about warming. Mr. Dyer wants to talk a little bit about cooling and how some of the new technologies can assist us in our future. Please welcome James Dyer.
Thank you. You're going to experience a phenomenon that most people have not. If you're into music, I can suggest that Andrea Bocelli has just left the stage, Dr. Overpeck, and now Weird Al Yankovic is gonna close out the program. So. But fortunately, I've only got a few minutes of things to say. As a sponsor or one of the sponsors of this year's conference, I think it's fair for me to say thank you all for being here. We at Nimbus have been here before. We were here, I think, 3 years in a row, and then we went away for a couple of years. And now we're back for reasons, I guess, that I'll be mentioning here in just a minute or two. Um, an ancient Greek philosopher named Heraclitus said, "No man ever steps into the same river twice, because it is not the same river, and he's not the same man." We know clearly that the river, and in this case in particular the Colorado River, has changed. It's changed over millennia. It's not the river that carved the Grand Canyon 6 million years ago. It's not the river that filled the Black Canyon of Nevada and made it Lake Mead in the 1930s. And the Colorado and all of the rivers that arise in the Rockies and the Sierra Nevada, whether they're in the watershed that flows to the Pacific or the watershed that flows to the Gulf of Mexico, all of them are stressed. The source of the stress is well explained by Dr. Overpeck. The three sources are drought, warming, and persistent increases in demand for water. And Dr. Overpeck eloquently explained that drought is not warming, and warming is not drought. They're separate phenomenon. We're just unlucky enough in this part of the country that they are coinciding here. And the thing that's happening is, as I said, the demand for water is increasing. And part of that is because population is shifting inside the states. In projections of the metropolitan areas likely to see the highest rate of growth between 2020 and 2025, five of those areas are in Southern California. Number 16 on that list is Las Vegas, Nevada. There's a couple in Utah. There's some in Texas. And over the history of man on Earth, population centers have grown where the water is. If you look at how the U.S. was settled, at the confluence of rivers is where cities grew, on the shores of the Great Lakes, where Dr. In fact, I admire him tremendously, but I have to say, I'm from Ohio, so I have to reserve some of my praise because he is at the University of Michigan. So I can't get caught saying too much good about him in public. Okay, go blue. Yeah, I really should have scarlet and gray behind me, but it's only a few minutes. So yes, over the history of mankind, people have migrated, gravitated to where the water is, and now, for I suppose their own reasons, people seem to be moving to specifically where the water isn't. So again, we're at an inflection point in terms of how we use water. We have a compelling need at this moment in time, and especially in this geography, we have a compelling need to not be the same man when we step into the river. We have to make some changes. The river's changed, and we need to change in response. My company, Nimbus, and let me introduce my fellows here. We're in light blue shirts today. But with me is Jimmy Horton. Jimmy, would you stand up? Jimmy is our Vice President General Manager of our manufacturing operations in Alabama. Jerry Pitt. Jerry gave the presentation this morning about our products. Jerry is our Business Development Director. And between them is Wamsi Mokapati, who is our Technical Director and responsible for all of our research and development and all of our product testing. So the four of us are here, and we'll be at the booth for the next couple of days, and we'd love to spend some time talking about the product and answering what questions you might have. As I mentioned, we were here 3 years running, and then in the third year, we went to school, if you will. We had a meeting with the Clark County School District. If you don't know it, the Clark County School District is the 5th largest public school system in the country. 544, I think, some 544 school buildings in the Clark County District. And we had a meeting with them to talk about our product. And they were enthusiastic about what they heard, but as a practical matter, our product was too big physically to fit readily into the areas that were occupied by more conventional cooling equipment. So we went home and we did some homework, and we re-engineered our product to have a much smaller footprint and a much higher elevation. We've got a small unit in the exhibit hall, but the units now that we're producing for applications such as Clark County are about 10 feet tall and about 30 feet long. And we've added